Need me to stay back and cover a shift? This will cost you big time. This comes from about 15 plus years ago, when I was, and still am, working with people with disabilities in a community home. It's a great job for those who like it, a terrible one for those who don't, meaning that any staff you meet are either very new, or long-term like myself. As a consequence, the turnover rate of staff is high, and replacement staff are slow to be hired, meaning you often find shifts not covered straight away. This is an industry where simply not having a shift filled isn't an option, particularly where I work. In a house with a single day staff and a single night staff, each working 12 shifts on a 7-day spread over 2 weeks roster. There are some strict rules regarding hours you can work, intended to avoid burnout, but more used to keep a rein of overtime, which, in our industry, paid plus 70% your hourly rate for the first 3 hours above your 76-hour fortnightly maximum, and plus 100% for any time after that. You can't demand overtime, but if they require you to work longer, they cannot pay you overtime. Also worth noting is that the people we work with are vulnerable, meaning they cannot be left unsupervised. Long story short, you can't go home until your replacement arrives. So back in the early 2000s, we were having problems locating staff. Lots of people working overtime and a lot of fresh faces appearing and disappearing. The house I worked in wasn't difficult in particular for adults with intellectual disability, but there was no support, by which I mean the worker there had to fend for themselves. There was no supervisor in the next building. They were miles and miles away. I'd frequently at this time had to stay back half an hour, waiting for staff to come replace me. I was less than happy with the way it was handled. Each time I called the office to tell them, the night staff haven't arrived. Do you know who is booked? To which I'd get the reply, we are still looking. How late can you stay? Single quote. The obvious answer was, until I'm replaced, but what I often said was, I prefer not to stay after the end of my shift. But that doesn't seem to matter now. So I'll stay here until someone comes. Each time a new face arrived, I'd give them all the information they'd need for the shift, introduce them, walk them through their duties, etc. This would take 2,030 minutes. The point being is, I don't just jump ship when a staff arrives to replace me. This is someone's home, and I like them, so I'm not going to leave them in the hands of someone uninformed. Cut to that weekend. My roster had me working 12-hour days Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Come Friday night, my replacement didn't arrive. I waited. I sent a text message to the supervisor after 15 minutes, then called after 30, left a message, and when they eventually called back, I could tell they had not found a replacement. I told them I'd stay until they did. This was by that time an hour after I was meant to finish. 10 p.m. Come 11, they call and say they simply can't find a replacement. They offer a deal and say if I stay and do the night shift, I can take the next shift off. It's pretty even, so you won't miss out, they said. Then they changed their tone and said, it's not really a request. We have no other option. Treat this as a direction. I reminded them it was a passive house, meaning you got half the hourly rate from midnight, but you could sleep in the bed provided, so I'd actually be taking a pay cut. They didn't know what else they could do, so I made a suggestion. I'd stay and do the night shift, but I wasn't going to give up my next shift. I was going to do that one as well. They agreed. It meant they didn't need to find a replacement for me in the morning, so they thought it was a good deal for them. It was, however, an even better deal for me. It took a few emails over the weekend with the union to sort out the particulars, but what happened was this. Once I couldn't leave my work site because of a lack of replacement. I was on overtime, as this overtime was because of a direction, not voluntary. It remained in place until I went home. Because I didn't agree to drop my following day shift. My overtime continued till I ended on Saturday night. The upshot being that, working 36 hours in a row, resulted in the equivalent of 60 hours pay. I was the first person to, as they say, pull this stunt, and word got around that if you didn't get replaced you were actually the person who was in a position of power. It didn't take long until the department put a little more effort into training and employing extra staff. So something like this never happened again. Not at least to me. Dude, I had a similar experience. Place I worked had 36 patients. During the day it was split among 5 PPL. Evening shift had 3 people. And night had 2. I work evening shift and would sometimes cover nights. This time though both night shift called out. I had all 36 patients to myself and still no break. After I covered the night, the entire day shift called out. I had worked from 3 p.m. day 1 to 10 a.m. day 2 and I was scheduled to work 311 on day 2. They wanted me to continue staying. I told them I was overly tired and it put my patients at risk. So I left at 10 and they were pissed. 3 p.m. rolls around and I called them with the fakest call and told them I was sick. I told them if they pull a stunt like that again I'm bringing the labor laws down on them as well as notifying the board of a potential lawsuit. Great story. I'm struggling not to go on a tangential rant about the horrendous lack of investment in and support for workers in the adult care sector. As a society we need you guys so much and you aren't looked after half as well as you should be. Some states have put caps on how long you can work. My state is 16 hours with 8+ off minimum. The reason for this is that adult DDA facility had one staff work 36+ hours straight with no rest or breaks. A client died due to being given the wrong meds. The staff was charged with murder but all charges were dropped during trial. The facility lost their license. Appreciate your efforts and sticking it out to help people, but it's a shame those same efforts are taken advantage of or even preyed on in such industries. Is there better shift changeovers now? Love when Manglement agrees to things for which they don't know the impact, just to solve the immediate problem. I feel like in this story, you were Hulk, and your supervisor was Loki. Loki, I'm a god. You will obey me. Quote, Hulk. Flipslam. Flapslam. Flipslam. Flapslam. Flipslam. Flapslam. Puny god. My mother used to work in that situation. Being a parent of multilingual background, she was very tolerant and strong-willed to keep the job going. Ferengi rule of acquisition number 13, anything worth doing is worth doing for money. Staying later to help people and to screw over your boss? Best story ever. Spoiler: abuse did not read. My dad always says that overtime is the penalty companies pay for not hiring enough people. This story pretty well exemplifies that. Well done.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.